Today I want to talk to you about my instructor, my very first martial arts instructor, Master Yun Tak Bong. He's not well known in the martial arts, however, he is very well known and very revered among the students he's had. He's made an impact on every student that I've ever come across who used to train with him. A majority of his students were American servicemen and women who served in the Army and were stationed in South Korea at Camp Ames or had been in that area. And every student that I've come across that's learned from him has been impacted by him. And it wasn't just his teachings. So in this video, I just want to kind of dedicate this video to Master Yun and his memory and, you know, my experience training with him. Okay, before I get into the details of my training with Master Yun, you have to realize Korea in 1985 is a totally different country than everybody knows today. The village of Changdong-ri, you can see the yellow dot, was located just above the city of Daejeon, which used to be the capital of South Korea before it moved to Seoul. Changdong-ri was a village very rural. It was farming, rice paddies, a very simple life, and it was very quaint. It was very quiet. There wasn't a whole lot of people that lived there. The population was very small, but it was mainly rice paddies and farming. You didn't see like the modern buildings that they had today. It was the older buildings. The floors were heated with charcoal burners underneath the floor. They had that system there. And it was mountains. All around us were mountains. It sat in a valley. They harvested ginseng and other things. But this is where Camp Ames 8th Army Base was located, and this is where Changdong-ri is where Master Yun's dojang was located. He trained both soldiers on base, and he trained civilians and soldiers in his dojang off base. When I started training with Master Yun, he was around my age now, I believe, around early 50s. And he was very revered in the Tang Soo Do circles, in the martial arts circles. He was in charge of Chungnam province for the Korean Tang Soo Do Association under Grandmaster Hwang Ki, the founder of the Muda Kwan. In this photo, you can see him standing to the right of Grandmaster Hwang Ki, and to the right of Master Yun is Roger Steakley, who was a senior student of his at the time and who was gracious enough to send me these photos. Master Yun was the head person, and he oversaw everything that had to do with Tang Soo Do in that area. He had many students, and the dojang that he had is pictured here. You can see the open door next to the dojang there. That was an alley that led back to his home. His home was connected to the dojang, so it was right there. Inside, it was a wooden floor, very simple. Couple of mirrors, an empty space, a filled duffel bag hanging as a heavy bag. And in the summers, it was super hot and humid with just an open window. In the winters, it was very cold with a wood-burning stove on the floor, which we often ended up bumping into and burning ourselves. And that sets the stage for our training in Korea. I started training with Master Yun in January of 1985. I had just gotten out of basic training and had just arrived in Korea, South Korea. It was my very first duty station. I wasn't crazy about being there. However, I was kind of excited because at that time my idol was Chuck Norris. I had seen Chuck Norris's movies when they opened at the theater, so I'm dating myself here. I've seen all of his movies at the theater. And when I went there, I knew that Chuck Norris had trained in Tang Soo Do in Korea when he was an airman with the Air Force, and he learned at Osan Air Base. Well, I was kind of hoping to go to Osan Air Base. Instead, I got sent to Camp Ames, Korea, which was a very small base in the kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was in a mountain valley, and you actually had to go over this mountain, one road in and out. You had to go over this mountain into the valley, and there was this little village there called Changdong-ri, and the base was at the end of the road. The road went over the mountain through the village and ended up straight at the main gate of the base. It was small, really small. The village itself was a small village with just a couple of small businesses, one restaurant slash bar, the downtown where everybody went to get some food. There was a Happy Valley, which was a club with a bartender, maybe one or two girls, and that was about it, serving drinks. And there was another bar, I can't remember the name of it, that was up stairway up on a hill. But anyway, it was very small. There was a small supermarket, and I saw these things when I was coming in. I arrived at Camp Ames at night. In January, it was winter. The winters there are extremely cold. Anybody that's ever been there or is familiar with like the Korean War, the winters are brutal, very, very cold. The cold kind of just blows through whatever the heck you're wearing. And being in the valley of a mountain valley, the wind whipped through that valley quite often. So that was my arrival. But when I was driving in, I was coming in by Jeep. Somebody had picked me up at their train station from the unit and drove me into the base. And as we were going through, it was dark. Of course, a couple of street lights, that was about it, but it didn't look like a whole hell of a lot. After I had in process that day, 2 days later, I decided to wander off base and go check things out. And when I was walking around, I went and got something to eat, and on my way back to my room, I was coming toward the base, I heard this noise and guys yelling, and I knew what that sound was. And my heart kind of leapt, because being in Camp Ames, from what I saw coming in, I was like, there is no way there's a freaking school around here. I mean, this place is so remote. When I heard those yells, and I knew that there was a martial art, whatever art it was, I didn't know at the time, but I knew it was a martial art. My heart leapt, and I went over to the building where I heard the noise coming from. And then it was a very small building with 2 wood doors on the front, and it was right outside the main gate, next to the Korean police station. And I walked in, the door was kind of opened a little bit. I peeked in, there were 3 people in there. There were 2 students and the instructor. And they were doing basics, going up and down the floor. So I was kind of watching through the crack in the door, and when they turned around and had their back to me and were going away from me, I snuck in and quietly closed the door, and I just kind of sat down and was watching. When they turned around to come back toward me, all 3 of them saw me. And they kind of just looked, all 3 of them just kind of looked, and the class just continued. Didn't pay me no mind whatsoever. Once they got back toward my end of the floor, the instructor, who was Master Yun, he gave me this patented grin he had and nodded and continued with the class. That was the only acknowledgement at all until the class was finished. He was very disciplined that way. Class went on no matter what until it was finished. You were expected to be there. You were expected to work the whole time until the class was finished. When it was finished, then you could take your break. Once class ended and they bowed out, he came over and I bowed, introduced myself. He introduced himself, and I asked what style it was, what he was teaching, what art it was, and he said Tang Soo Do, Murakwan. So I was like, at that, when hearing that and realizing that I had a Tang Soo Do school, the same art that Chuck Norris had learned, right outside the main gate of where I was at, I could not believe. I mean, I thank God that it was there. I could not believe it was there. And Master Yun then, explained kind of briefly that, that the art came from Hwang Ki. He explained that he was a 7th Dan and 7th degree black belt in the art. He was the head of Chungnam province for Hwang Ki, overseeing Tang Soo Do in that area of Korea. And at that time, I never remember Master Yun talking about a different instructor. I was always led to believe that he learned from Hwang Ki. And I've heard a couple other people suggest that he had a different teacher, that his teacher was not directly under Hwang Ki, that it was maybe a student of Hwang Ki that taught him. But either way, it doesn't really matter to me. Either way, I mean, if he's only maybe 1 removed or 2 removed from Hwang Ki. So he learned and was a trusted student of Hwang Ki, who was put in charge of a province in Huang Qi's organization, and Huang Qi, for those of you who don't know, is the founder of the Muda Quan school of Tang Soo Do. And he was put in charge of that, and he was with Huang Qi on many different occasions, many different events, and he was kind of like his right-hand man in that area. So, I mean, he was very close to Huang Qi. It wasn't like he was a student way down the line that Huang Qi maybe or maybe not have knew about. He knew who he was. He explained the art, explained, classes were Monday through Friday, 5 days a week from 7 to 9 p.m. And the cost was only $25 a month. Compare that to today's costs of classes, which are well over $100 in most places. $25 a month. And it included your uniform. So I got my uniform, got my white belt, and it happened to be on a Friday, just like today. And I was told to come back on Monday and start my lessons, and I did. Learning the art of Tang Soo Do, and especially the way that Master Yun taught it, has impacted my life so much. And I've carried the teachings and what I learned with my time there throughout my whole life, ever since I left. And the key thing was, Master Yun wasn't just my Tang Soo Do instructor. I mean, I was there 5 days a week. I was there on my off days. Many times I was there on a Saturday. If I wasn't working or on a Saturday, I would be there. I would be there sometimes twice a day. Basically, that dojang, Master Yun's school, was my home away from home. If I wasn't working on base as an MP, doing military stuff, or sleeping in my room, I was 9 times out of 10, I was in the dojang training. And I loved it. I loved it. And Master Yun taught, he explained things as best he could in detail. He would correct you physically. In class, he did the class with you. He did the warm-ups. He did the basics, walking the floor. He did all of that with us. And he was at the head of the line, of course, and he demonstrated everything. We followed him. So you saw how it was supposed to be done from day one, going up and down the floor. He wasn't just standing off on the side, barking out the count. He was actually doing the basics with you so that you saw him do them the way they were supposed to be done. And then he would explain little things. He would come around, he would maybe lead going one way, and then when you turned around, he would make corrections. And if we needed to go up and down again because other people are doing it wrong, he would take the time to do it again. But he watched and he made corrections to your form. When we were doing if you were in a front stance, he would walk around and he would climb up on your back leg. Your back leg is supposed to be locked. He would step up on your back leg, put your hand on your shoulders, and he would just climb up to make sure that you were doing your stance right. If you were doing a punch and you had your hand out, he would come by and smack your fist to make sure that your fist was tight and that it was formed correctly and that your body was locked, So, I mean, all these little things, he paid attention to detail and he taught these things. And he took the time. Once the basics were done, he then started teaching the class, and he would teach. And all of his classes, they all went in a very specific manner. It started out, you bowed in. When I first started out, when we first started, and he kind of got away from it. When we first started, we had to hit the makiwara in the dojang. Right at the entrance, there were 2 wooden posts. It wasn't like this. It wasn't padded like this. It was just 2 wooden posts. There wasn't even any straw on there. It was just a wooden post with a flat face on it, and we had to hit that before we even got on the floor to start class. We were told to do it 50 times each hand. That started out. Then we got into the class. And at the time when I first started, there were only 3 students. So doing that at the beginning of class really didn't take up any time. Once more students started showing up, he kind of dropped that because we needed to spend more time. It took longer to get through the class because there were more people. So we started doing that. Then we bowed in. Then there was meditation, and it was not any kind of religiously related meditation, because so many people sit there and think that the Eastern religions are related to martial arts. There was none of that in this class or any of his classes. The meditation was just sitting there, deep breathing exercise where you closed your eyes, you dropped all the BS that you came there with, anything that happened during the workday, anything that was going on outside of the school. You forgot it all and you prepared your mind for the lessons that you're about to go through. You focused on Tang Soo Do. That's what that was for. And once that was finished, we did our basics. Started out with the standby punch and a horse stance, stationary punches. Then we went through all the different basics of Tang Soo Do that he taught. This is a photo of the actual basics that were hanging in the dojang, and this is the list of basics that we went over every single class as a warm-up. We went up and down the floor performing these, and these are still the basics that I use today and the first things that my students learn. Funny enough, I even call them by the same names that are listed here, because that's just so ingrained in my mind that those are the terms I use. Once that was done, you would do, if there was something that he was going to teach, like a new technique, a new kick or that, he would do that lesson. You'd practice it. Then we did hyungs. We went through forms. And depending on what level you were at, you all did the basic forms. If there was like a white belt, like when I started, I was at white belt, the other guys were blue belt. So we all did the white belt forms. And once I got to my extent of what I knew, I went off on the side and everybody else continued and I watched them. And then that's the way it went. And then as more and more belt ranks, progressed, people would just eventually, once they got to what they knew, they would sit on the side until everybody got through all the forms that they practiced. Once that was finished, then we did one-step sparring. Not all the time, but we would do one-step sparring and then sparring. Sparring was no protective gear. You didn't have gloves. You didn't have foot pads. If you were smart, you had a cup. And it was light contact. Light contact for Master Yun. He said light contact, but I think he really enjoyed watching us beat the crap out of each other, because it was very often medium, at least minimum medium contact. We would actually step into our side kicks and kind of take each other off our feet and throw us into the wall. Or there were on occasion where you would do a spinning kick and catch somebody in the head. And accidents did happen. I bruised knuckles, bruised heels from catching somebody in the head with a spinning heel kick, stitches. So we took our lumps. It wasn't a class where everything was like sanitized and you can't. They didn't worry about getting bruised or bumped or anything in fear of getting sued by their students. That was the training there. It was hard. It was physical. There were no mats. You fell if you were taken down, or you fell, it was on the hardwood floor. There was no mats. And it was accepted. It was just, that's the way it was. You didn't complain about it. You didn't whine about it. You just did it. And that was the way he taught. The other thing was, Master Yun did not teach for sport. He didn't teach for competition. Master Yun taught for self-defense, and he taught the art. And that was one of the biggest things that has stuck with me from day one till today, is that the martial arts, while competing in sport is fine, if that's what you want to do, it's not what the martial arts are about. When he taught Tang Soo Do was a lifestyle. It's a way of life. It starts out in the dojang, learning the basics and the forms, and then as you progress, you couldn't help but have it take over and affect other areas of your life. It affects your job. It affects how you respond to people outside of the dojang. It affects your relationships with others. I mean, it just, the way he taught it was as an art. And his impact on his students, it wasn't just me. I've talked to other students that were students of his through my military years. When I went to Germany, the police station captain in charge of the police station, the MP station, was a student of Master Yun's, and he had trained way before I did. Master Yun had photos around the top of the walls of all of his black belts. And some of them were Korean, but most of them were servicemen and women. And he was one of those guys up there. But I met other students, and when I got to talking to them, even my captain, I mean, he would talk and he had the same reverence for Master Yun, the same love for this guy as his instructor. And he had the same love of the art of Tang Soo Do as well. It was passed on by Master Yun to all of his students. Everybody that I've encountered even since then online that have studied with Master Yun has been affected by him in the same way. And that's going to wrap up part 1 of Remembering Master Yun. In part 2, I'm going to focus on training, how he trained in his training with me. I had a lot of opportunity to train with him one-on-one during my time, and at one point I was his only student practicing at the time. And also things, both legend and what I've actually seen that he could do, how effective he really was, and talk more about the man. But I just wanted to lay the groundwork on what a great instructor he was and the impact that he had on all of his students. I hope I wasn't too long-winded. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to this channel because there's going to be way more Tang Soo Do stuff coming out, instructional and otherwise. And if you click the little bell next to the subscribe button, you'll be notified every time a new video gets posted. So go ahead and click that as well. Share it with those who you think might be interested, and go ahead and you can subscribe to thewarriorinyu.com. In all the videos will be there as well, or my personal website at kevinwpatalia.com. And if you're interested in connecting with each other and discussing Tang Soo Do and everything else, go ahead to the Warrior in You Facebook group and go ahead and sign up for that as well, because I will be in there. And as we build this community, and I want it to be a community of Tang Soo Do practitioners, whether you're new, whether you're experienced, whether you're old, go ahead so that everybody can connect and we can progress and advance together. So until next time, part 2 will be coming out next week on Wednesday. So look for it. God bless. Have a good weekend and keep training. Tang Soo.